Hello, Talkin fight fans around the world. Thank you once again for joining us on another episode of the Olympics featuring Christian from the Friday night panel. I've readjusted my seating today, so I'm a little uncomfortable in how I'm looking here. But anyway, let's get down to it. Do we have any news on the Olympics front, Christian?
Absolutely. And some on just the amateur boxing front as usual as well. So Tokyo organizers have now asked for about 500 nurses to help during this year's games. Now this is coming from Toshiro Moto, the head of the Olympic Organizing Committee. He mentioned this just this morning. So local media reported that that the organizing committee has asked the country's nursing association for assistance in staffing Olympic venues as well as the athletes' village, both before and during the July 23rd to August 8th games. Olympic organizers are pushing ahead with their preparations as Japan struggles to contain a resurgence of the coronavirus pandemic. The country on Friday had declared areas including Tokyo and Osaka to be in a state of emergency. So Toshiro Moto has said that we asked around 500 nurses to be considered. The main condition is that this must not negatively affect regional medical health care. The organizing committee has also said that it will convene a roundtable with medical experts on Friday to discuss COVID-19 measures for the games. Now, this roundtable will be made up of 6 experts and will be meeting regularly to discuss specific measures that are going to be necessary in order to hold safe and secure games. So it looks like they're, like everything else, looks like they're kind of plunging ahead at this point, Graham. Despite public opinion and despite a few setbacks along the relay route and things like that, they're pushing forward and now asking for some volunteers in the healthcare community. So this will be what we were talking about a little bit before when they were talking about expanding visas and things to specialized people with special abilities and experience and things like that. Healthcare professionals for the games would definitely fall into that kind of category. So again, hopefully all goes well with that, and hopefully they have nurses to spare if things start to calm down a little bit in the coronavirus front. But moving along, that's the only thing coming out of the actual inner workings of the games themselves for the moment. Checking in with our friends in India, who we know who have been kind of sidelined over the last little while with cases of COVID-19. The women's side isn't boxing at all at the moment, just due to a recent outbreak. Half the men's team was quarantined and they weren't doing so hot. But some of our friends in India have been boxing. So I thought we'd check in on that. Indian boxer Amit Pangal, who you guys will know from this show, has settled for a bronze at the Governor's Cup in St. Petersburg, Russia over the weekend. Now, that was after going down in the 52-kilogram semifinal against the reigning Olympic champion, Shakobuddin Zoirev. Now, the current number one, Amit Pangal, who beat Russia's Tamir Galanov in the first round, lost 5-0 to Uzbekistan's Shakobuddin Zoirev in the final 4. Now, incidentally, Zoirev also beat Amit Pangal back in 2019 at the World Championships final to claim gold in that event. Now, both of these guys have already qualified for the Tokyo Olympics and will both be considered top contenders in the 52-kilogram category at the Summer Games. Amit Pangal was the only Indian medalist at this particular tournament. The Commonwealth Games bronze medalist Tanwar, as well as Mohammad Hussamuddin, meanwhile, lost to Kazakhstan's Abeyek Orabli and Uzbekistan's Miraziz Muzkeladov by unanimous decisions in their respective opening bouts. So unfortunately, in other matches as well, Sumit Sangwan was bested by Uzbek boxer Dishad Rumzatov. Varinder Singh lost to the Kazakh Bakuner Ojnov, and Manesh Kaushik faltered against the home favorite Gabriel Mamedov. All three lost 5-0 in their opening bouts. So not what we're used to seeing from the Indian side in international tournaments. Earlier on in the year, we were seeing back in February the possibility of seeing, 11. They did have 11 podiums. Some of them, unfortunately, were silvers due to walk-offs, but not exactly what we're used to seeing from these guys. But it is good to see them back in the ring, and that coronavirus hasn't completely ground the Indian boxing side to a halt. Moving from that tournament, though, onto the next, we've heard from our friends in Belarus that Galina Bruevich of Belarus has cinched a bronze in the women's 57 category at the international boxing tournament Branko Presic Memorial Belgrade Winners Tournament, which, as we know, is underway currently from the 23rd up through the 27th. Now, the Belarusian defeated Croatia's Nikolina Karchik 4-1 in the quarterfinal, but lost to Russia's Ludmila Vorontsova in the semifinal. Now, according to competition rules, athletes who reach this stage of the tournament will be receiving bronze medals, and that's pretty standard stuff once we get into those quarters and semifinals. Three more Belarusian athletes: Yulia Apensovich in the 51 kilogram category, Alexandra Karpovich in the 54 kilogram category, and Victoria Kroblikova in the 75 kilogram category did not make the podium, losing quarterfinal bouts. Now, the 58th edition of the Branko Presic Memorial Belgrade Winter Tournament has welcomed 211 male and female athletes from 35 countries to the Serbian capital. And the organizers are very much viewing this event as a rehearsal ahead of the 2021 World Boxing Championships that will be taking place in Belgrade. It was just announced a little while ago. Our friends over in Great Britain at this tournament have definitely been working their way towards the podium with early wins for both McCormick brothers, Carolyn Dubois, Galel Yaffe, Charlie Davidson, Peter McGrail, and, of course, Ben Whitaker. Team Great Britain suffering only one loss so far, and that would be Lewis Richardson, who lost to Russia's Nikita Voronov. That tournament is, of course, still ongoing, and we'll let you know how things shape up once we get a better idea what the podiums are going to look like for that. But I have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to be seeing a few of our friends from across the pond hitting the podium at this one, for sure. And according to Carl at Last Bell, he says that's what we do. Off to a strong start, Carl, off to a strong start. But other than that, it's been a pretty slow weekend around the rings. We've got a couple of the tournaments on, but as far as the actual Olympic Games go, it's been all quiet other than a request for nurses from regional areas that are not being particularly heavy hit with COVID in Japan.
On the home front, did you happen to see the comments made by former Olympian Hayley Wickenheiser, who's now, I think within the month, going to become a full-fledged qualified doctor? And she said the medical professions, the various medical professions from around the world should be the ones making the decision as to whether or not to hold the Olympics, not the Olympic committees, because they are mandated by their agreements that are more commercially based as opposed to medically based. So anyway, it was a big article that came out on the weekend. I don't know if you noticed it or not.
I did see that one. I didn't get into it because Hayley Wickenheiser, is a Canadian treasured hero, of course, for those of you watching from abroad, but is a hockey player, which is one of the reasons which makes her so lovable in Canada. But and you hit the nail right on the head with this one, Graham. If you were letting medical professionals decide if these games were going forward, if you were leaving this in the hands of medical professionals solely, the answer would be no. It's not happening. Just because there's too many moving parts, you're welcoming thousands of people into a region that's already in the middle of just hit crisis mode again. So if you were just letting the doctors decide this, of course it wouldn't happen. But it's not just the exposure, it's not just the athletes. As we know, there's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake here from many different stakeholders all over the globe, both in the Japanese market as well as every country has their own domestic market. That's where the people have been filming Olympic themed commercials for their products. People have been buying that commercial time. Newscasters have already been setting aside, mass swaths of their schedule in July for the Paralympics as well as the Olympic Games. So there's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake here, and they're not going to leave that in the hands of the doctors.
Yeah, without a doubt. I actually saw a commercial for the Olympics on our national broadcaster on the weekend. So they're already planning ahead to ingrain it in people's minds. There's an Olympics coming up this summer, and stay tuned. So yeah, there's a lot at stake. Yeah, without a doubt.
I already have a T-shirt somewhere around here that send this in off the top of your cereal box, and I think it was from Cheerios or something like that for the Olympic Games, for Team Canada for the Olympic Games from the first time before it got canceled. So these guys are already there's already companies sitting on these stacks of of Olympic swag and stuff like that they've been sitting on for a year now that they're still trying to sell as well. So it'll be a question of how many of them are still trying to sell it with 2020 on it. How many people are trying to sell updated 2021 swag? Hard to say. But people have already gone out of pocket. And there's warehouses full of merch, among other things, just sitting around waiting for these games to happen. So they're not going to leave it in the hands of the doctors. And the only thing they can do at this point.
I was just going to say, not to mention warehouses full of contracts. So those obligations need to be met. And,
Olympic branded condoms, as we've covered on this show before, even though we're doing 6 foot apart social distancing.
Most importantly, yes. That's right.
Well, those are for Olympic. Those will be for Olympic balloon animals only at this particular Olympiad. But they've already made these things. They're already sitting in warehouses. So at this point, all we can really do is keep consulting with the doctors, bring more and more professionals, not only medical but just from a logistics standpoint, on board to try to keep all the various moving parts as separate as we possibly can, in order to try to hold as safe a games as you can, given the circumstances. Are they going to be a safe games? The answer is no, they're not. You can't make a safe games in a pandemic. Are they going to be as safe as they possibly can be? Absolutely.
Yes. I mean, that's akin to saying, is it safe crossing the road? No, there's many moving parts involved. But
but when you get professionals involved, they put a crosswalk there. Before you get the professional involved, now you've just got 1,000 people trying to stream across a highway, doing their best to play Frogger. And I've seen that in other places around the world, kind of thing. And I've almost gotten run over playing Frogger alongside of them. But as of you've been right next to me a couple of times. But that's the difference. You bring in the experts. The experts go, "Oh, you should probably have a crosswalk there." That's a great idea. Okay, yes. Can you still get hit at the crosswalk? Yes, but it's a much safer experience now for all people involved. That's my point.
Yeah, I've been watching some professional games, and the stadiums are starting to fill up without a doubt. So I think your average general sports fan out there is of the mindset, hey man, I'm going to wear my mask, but I'm still going to go to the game.
Well, I think a lot of people are under the are just going to be working under the assumption saying, well, if they've opened it back up, then it must be safe to do it. Yeah. Much in the same way that the government says, stay home, wear a mask, don't do this. You can't go to the pub. You can't, well, at least here. I know you guys are back in the pubs in the UK, but you can't go to the pub. You can't do all these things. And we go, okay, that was put in because you've consulted XYZ experts and they said, this is what our current lockdown measures are. So when those measures lift, the same people who have been diligently listening to those measures, would be forgiven easily for going, well, if you said it's open again, then it must be safe. Does that mean we should all be streaming en masse back into public spaces and forgetting basic social distancing and hygiene measures that have gone into place over the last year? Of course not. But you could understand the mentality. What do you mean? There's a match happening this weekend and we're allowed to go? Must be safe. And off we trundle. Off we go.
Yeah. Speaking of risk versus reward, how safe is it to swim in the ocean? How safe is it to fly to Mars?
Well, that depends. If you're swimming off Newfoundland or off Reunion Island, your chances of getting eaten by a shark are very different. Well, it's true. You can't keep it that broad.
Just ask Steve Irwin.
Half the sharks in the world are, shark attacks in the world happen off, Reunion Island off of Madagascar. One island. Half of the deadly shark attacks in the world. So yeah, you're going to go in there? Probably not. But if get a wetsuit, it's bloody cold. But you can swim off of Newfoundland. You're probably not going to get eaten by a shark.
I'm just saying that I'm agreeing with you. I think they've made it as safe as possible. They will be as safe as possible, regardless of the weather. But at the end of the day, I think the games are going to go forward. I think monetary concerns aside, I think they're going to be as safe as possible for the athletes, for the teams surrounding those athletes. It's sad that the fans won't be able to be there, but we will be online watching these as they unfold before our very eyes.
Now, the only way you'll see the games slowed down at this point, we're too close. There's too many contracts, as we've said. The only way you're actually going to see the games canceled at this point is you're not going to hear it from the IOC. You'll hear it from the Japanese government. If it happens, it'll be the Japanese government stepping in and going, guys, it's out of hand. And, things have gotten exponentially worse in Tokyo and Osaka and other places where we're looking to hold events. And we're not able to do this. No. But if, again, left in the hands of the IOC, this is going to steam forward ahead, kind of hell or high water.
I think with respect to sports in general, though, I think this COVID pandemic has certainly illuminated a lot of people to the opportunity that is abounding online. You may only be able to sell 16,000 seats or 80,000 seats to a game, but you can acquire 8 million or 80 million people online. Just ask Jake Paul. I mean, quite frankly, at the end of the day, the online audience is there and they're willing to pay. So there's still a lot of money to be made online, regardless of how many people it now. Is it fun for the athlete to play in front of no fans? That's the well, just ask your average pole vaulter. But at the end of the day, I think it's a whole new era of sports.
Well, this is what we're looking at. This is where the music industry was, 10, 15 years ago when we first started seeing, well, actually 20 years ago now, when streaming first started, we started seeing the first iPods come out. And you're going, how are we going to monetize this? When people are not buying albums anymore, how do we monetize this? People aren't going to concerts. They're not spending as much, bands aren't spending as much time on the road. They're not going to concerts. So if fans aren't paying to see them live, how are they making their money? How are we going to monetize this streaming kind of situation? And that's come a long way. And the music industry really helped us on that front. But that's where a lot of major sports are looking right now, is going, yeah, we can't get 20,000 people here. We can't get, we're talking in terms of American football, you're talking 70,000 people showing up to a match. How do we monetize? Then that'll be, because, so I don't see sports dying because the fans can't show up anymore, even right now. And even if it does, we are looking at reduced in the future. I think they'll just find a new way to monetize this at the end of the day.
Yeah, to be clear, I mean, I'm old enough to appreciate tradition, and I want to go to a sporting event. But then take a look at tennis. I think we've talked about this before. You're not allowed to say anything during a tennis match, you get thrown out. So, I mean, how exciting is it for the tennis players? I mean, they don't care if anyone's in the crowd or not. All right, so that's about it for today, I think. I think the Olympics are going to go forward. I'm sure you do too. And they're going to attract the best of the best in all sports as per normal. I think millions of people, billions of people around the world are going to watch. It'll be interesting to see what happens to Team India, though, because of the new outbreak in India and the flight restrictions out of India. I hope that gets solved pretty soon because that might impact, unless their team is elsewhere in the world training.
No, they're at Sports Authority of India complex and at JL Nehru complex in India right now. So they are training locally at the moment. And they've got a couple of outbreaks. Well, I'm sure like everyone else, even with the outbreak going on, as long as they're able to quarantine beforehand and under the current playbook, the newest playbook is supposed to be published later this week. But under the current playbook rules, all members of the Indian delegation that are going to be going to Tokyo will have to receive a negative COVID-19 result within 72 hours of them leaving for Tokyo. So there's no mandatory quarantine. So as long as they're able to quarantine themselves or isolate in the run up to Tokyo in those couple of weeks beforehand and post negative tests, there shouldn't be any issues as far as visa or travel getting into the Olympics. Yeah, as they're already expected. They'll be waiting on those.
That's funny. More medals for Britain, eh? Okay, all right. Just on a sidebar, to our friends in Britain who are watching right now, what happened to Mr. Bentley on the weekend? Anyway, I'll leave.
We'll let you weigh in at 4 with Mike on that one. Actually,
exactly.
That question.
We will.
Now you have time to formulate your answer properly.
Well, I'll see you tomorrow because I'm just chuckling away at these comments that are coming in. All right, we'll see you tomorrow, Christian. Thanks very much.
We'll talk then.